So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just a couple of quick comments as we're going through the presentation. I imagine a number of you are familiar with Zoom presentations or webinars, but we'd like for you to utilize the chat to put some questions in there throughout the presentation, and we'll either address them as we're going through this with my colleagues, Amal and Amanda, or we can talk about them towards the end of the presentation, or also maybe even have some of our students who are joining address them as we start the panel afterwards. But to start things off tonight, my name is Ben Linville-Engler. I am the Industry and Certificate Director for MIT System Design and Management. A little bit about myself, I am also an alum of the program, so I'll be able to provide you both student perspective as well as staff perspective working for the program now. Prior to joining MIT SDM, I worked in the medical device industry for a little over 10 years. And can go into more of my background if folks are interested. But I'll talk a little bit as we go through this, what interested me in joining the program, but then also a little bit more about the different ways in engaging with MIT SDM. So who we are and a little bit of history about the program. We really are focused on solving complex challenges at the intersection of engineering and business. And we've been doing this for a while now. MIT SDM is almost 25 years old. Actually, the next year's cohort will be our official 25th cohort and 25-year anniversary. So we were founded in 1996 in collaboration with industry. At the time, it was companies like United Technologies or Kodak or HP who came to MIT, and they were really looking for a program to help further educate the technology-grounded leaders of the future. And so MIT SDM was formed as a joint program between the School of Engineering and the Sloan School of Management. And as I mentioned, we really do further develop experienced technical professionals with an emphasis on enabling them to lead effectively and creatively. And we do this by focusing on solving complex challenges with taking a systems thinking approach to multidisciplinary problem solving, model-driven engineering, design, and strategic decision making. And I'll touch on a couple of those themes here coming up. So where do we fit at MIT? As I mentioned, we're really at the intersection of business and engineering and technology, which really enables both our program and our students to have access to some really incredible resources across campus. Subject matter experts in business and leadership, operations, and more from the Sloan School through their courses or action learning labs, as well as annual research symposiums and conferences. Similarly, on the engineering side of the school, MIT SDM students have access to courses in all departments and opportunities to engage with labs across campus. And we find that our students have a high participation in research and teaching assistant positions based off of the experience that they come into the program with from industry and other organizations. And MIT and the greater Boston area, for those of you maybe that are local or have been in the area before, there really is an incredible ecosystem, and it's somewhat of a magnet for intelligent, driven, and creative people. And so a lot of the sort of accidental connections that happen are really great opportunities to share ideas, meet new people, and maybe learn about new opportunities. And as I mentioned, we were originally formed in collaboration with industry and maybe some government organizations. And that's a relationship that we really maintain. And that's a lot of what my role is today, is ensuring that we have great partnerships with companies that are either sponsoring students or maybe projects or other engagements. And we really, that relationship is really important to our program because we very much focus on research in action. Right? We want to take what we're learning, but then how do we apply that into the businesses of today? So where we play, as I mentioned, we take that systems thinking approach to systems engineering, and we do that in our core class, which I will dive into a little bit more in a minute, but really looking at how systems thinking can be applied to systems architecture, engineering, and project management, and really understanding the relationships and interdependencies between those for either a large program or maybe a new service that might be being developed. Another way of describing this is really looking at sort of a difference between maybe your undergrad engineering curriculum, in which you are probably often taught to be a problem solver, Oftentimes math problems in undergraduate engineering are single solution focused. So you either get the answer right or you get it wrong. The real world doesn't typically work that way. So we really push our students to take this systems thinking approach to be problem seekers first and really understand the problem space, the stakeholders that are involved, right? And oftentimes it's not just a single problem that you're solving, but maybe a series of connected problems. It could be over a life cycle. And then as you better understand that problem space is what decisions do you have control over, right? To make some design decisions and choices. And then how do you evaluate a solution space and the options that you have, not just that single potential solution that maybe you started with. I mentioned systems thinking a number of times already. In the context of SDM, I want you to think in the terms of human connected design, right? It's really a holistic perspective and a way of learning, understanding the relationships and the value of relationships, connections and interdependencies between maybe people within your interacting with your product or your service. Could be, human to human connections or data transfer, but really looking at how do you understand, identify, maybe even visualize those relationships that sometimes aren't necessarily easy to see. And from those relationships, especially as these unfold over time, what is the dynamic behavior and emergent properties that come through that? Whether it's architectural hierarchies, organizations, or even unintended consequences for things around safety and other control systems. The other aspect to this that I mentioned then is systems engineering, and there might be some folks who have experience with this or have heard of the organization INCOSE, or potentially a product methodology or development methodology called the V model. Within SDM, as we couple that with systems thinking, we're really looking at how do you integrate a wide range of disciplines into a team effort, really understanding both the business and the technical needs of stakeholders, and how do you deliver value, how do you define what value is to those stakeholders, and then ultimately what is the structured development process that you might go through, right? And that could be a traditional waterfall methodology or agile or others, but whichever implementation methodology you may be pursuing, how do you address risk and uncertainty throughout the full life cycle of the product or service or system that you're designing for? And really understanding those relationships between things like form, function, and frequency. So that's a brief introduction to who we are at MIT System Design and Management. What I'd really like to talk to you more about now is who our students are. Many of them will be very similar backgrounds to yourselves, so I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the cohort of 2020, the students that are currently in the program. So we really focus on having a high degree of diversity both in life experience and professional experience. Our students average about 8 to 10 years of professional experience. This is a key differentiator that we have in our program when compared to other engineering management programs or maybe MBA programs. We also bring experience from a wide range of industries. Folks come in with backgrounds in technology, software, healthcare, maybe aviation, automotive, and many, many more. This year, about 40 to 50% are either partially or fully sponsored by their company. This does include members of the armed service from the US that come into our program every year. And I'll talk about the ways in which you can pursue different degrees through SCM, but we do have opportunities for local commuters. And we also find that roughly 50% of our students this year are from the US, the other 50% are from outside the US. And I'll talk about the makeup of our student backgrounds a little more. As I mentioned, our students have a large diversity of life experience, and a lot of this also has to do with where folks attend from. And we do like to meet people where they're at around the globe. And we do this both through in-person and live synchronous digital delivery of our courses. This year we have students that have attended class from, it looks like, I think it's about 6 different continents around the US. And I'll show a little highlight video at the very end of how we've been able to do this year to give you a little bit more sense of how we've been interacting with students during COVID. And some of the educational background, and I think we've had a few questions about this. So to give you a sense of numbers, we have both a master's degree pathway and a graduate certificate pathway, and I'll explain the difference between those two here coming up. But in total, we roughly welcome about 100 students into both of these programs combined every year that make up our core class. Roughly 2/3, so say 65, 66, it's not a hard number every year, but about 2/3 are in our master's degree program, and about 1/3 are in our graduate certificate degree program. But in total, between the two, about half of all students coming into the SDM programs already have a master's degree. Some already have a PhD, potentially a JD. You'll hear from one of those students this evening. But everyone at least has a bachelor's degree coming into the program. Now that's the degree type, but let me tell you a little bit more around the specific degrees that they're coming from. And year over year, this does change, but we do see a large percentage of our students come in from mechanical engineering, might be working on large industrial systems or automated systems. But we also have a significant student population from electrical engineering or computer science software engineering. And what you can see here is that about any type of technical background, we generally have at least one student coming from that area. We've had in recent years a number of nuclear engineers or petroleum engineers, but we also do have some folks that come from maybe non-traditional, more business backgrounds, or even some doctors in past years. And again, that is going to be a little bit different depending upon how you look at this across the master's degree or across the certificate degree. And then just kind of a view of industry backgrounds, and this is a little bit of an overlap between the master's degree pathway and the certificate pathway. Again, thinking in terms of the full 100 students that come into SDM every year. But you can see we have, agriculture, automotive, number of energy students has been increasing in the recent years, healthcare and medical device products, thinking about defense, infrastructure, aerospace, manufacturing. And what I will say is, if you don't see your industry here, don't worry. Again, this changes year over year, but we do really look to have a high degree of both life experience and professional experience in the program. And I will say this was one of the major drivers for me to come into the program when I joined in 2016. I'd been working for one company for a little over 10 years in the medical device space. I really knew how they operated as a company, both in the business side and the engineering side, but was really interested in learning from those 100 peers in the classroom who also have significant experience and are subject matter experts in their own right, how they've solved similar problems or different problems, or how their organizations were structured. And so I will say, as you look to join the program, and if you get into the program, you're going to learn a lot from faculty and instructors, but you have an opportunity to learn a significant amount from your peers that are in the same cohort and classroom as you. And again, thinking in terms of industry, here's where some of our current students are either currently employed or most recently employed. As I mentioned, about half of our students continue to be employed and maybe work even part-time while they're in SDM, while others may have left their job to be full-time students. And there's different ways in which you can work your way through the program depending upon your current situation. So Amal and Amanda, I haven't been keeping track of questions. Are there any that we should stop and answer right now that you have seen?
It's mainly about which background will fit with SDM. A lot of them think they need to be an engineer or very technical to apply. So if you can address that, and just the difference between the certificate versus the master's,
okay,
and classes being online. And how is that going forward?
Great. So yeah, let me talk a little bit about sort of the background. I would say the majority of our students do come in with an engineering or technical background. The SDM core class, which I'll talk about here in a second, which I think will also answer some of the questions around the differences between the graduate certificate degree and the master's pathway. But I would say the majority of our students do come in with a previous engineering or technical degree. And a lot of that also has to do with the work that they've been doing and where their experience comes from. Part of our application is the academic background, but we also do look to understand what you've been doing in your career thus far. 8 to 10 years after either a college degree or even a master's degree is a lot of time to sort of exercise the capacity that you may have beyond what your degree was in. And so that's really some of how we look at the application from a holistic standpoint. Is it's not just a single aspect that is going to necessarily be looked at solely on its own, but we really do look at what is the experience that you've had, what have you demonstrated in your career thus far on your capacity to, solve complex challenges or understand and communicate technical matters. So I would say that, we do have some students that, like I mentioned, come from non-traditional backgrounds, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk with one coming up as we get into the student panel to learn a little bit more around their decision to come into SDM and then their experience in navigating the program. I'm going to quickly talk about how the degree pathways are structured, and then I'll have a little bit more to comment on, some of the course requirements that you may need to think about as you're looking at applying for SDM. So we have this SDM core class. All 100 students take that, whether you're in the master's degree pathway or the graduate certificate degree pathway. Our SDM core is split into system architecture, system engineering, and project management, like I mentioned. If you're in the graduate certificate program, that is the majority of what you're doing. This is taken from fall through spring. And then our certificate students finish a summer capstone project. And so that graduate certificate is a full year where you start in August, you take your core class through SDM through May of the following year, and then you complete your certificate capstone. And that's that graduate certificate program. So you do take it with fellow master students. However, our master's degree pathway continues outside of the core class, and you're required to take a balance of engineering and management courses. So you'll see that we have a few different levels of engineering management courses. We have what we call depth and foundation courses, which are going to be very much system design adjacent courses on the engineering side, things like system safety or human systems engineering. And then you may find things on the management side in this depth foundation ring that are going to be more similar to what you might find from an MBA core series of classes. Outside of that, you have a wide selection of both engineering and management electives. As I mentioned, on the engineering side, our students have access to all of the departments of the School of Engineering, as well as a large amount of the course catalog from the Sloan School. And to finish out the master's degree, there is a 24 credit thesis. And something I need to mention is that at MIT, and this can be very different depending on your past education experience, 1 credit is roughly equivalent to 1 hour per week, right? And so as you're going through different courses, they may be credit weighted at 9, 12, some are even at 15. That's the estimated amount of time that you would be spending on that class that week. And they are further broken down into instructional time in the course, as well as maybe a recitation or a lab section, and then time expected to be spent outside of the class. Now, what I will say is that there's a large number of pathways for students to find their way to an SDM master's degree. I come from a medical device background. I focused on health related classes, also biology or bioscience classes. And so my pathway through SDM was quite unique to my interests, where someone who maybe I sat next to in the core class was following a completely different pathway. And so we do have some targeted pathways to help folks kind of maybe better understand, if I were to focus a lot on analytics or AI machine learning, I'm going to focus on this subset of classes and I don't need to necessarily worry about these. And these are really like some decision guides to help you think about how to select your courses. We have these in sustainability and energy, things like healthcare infrastructure, entrepreneurship and innovation. And there's opportunities to get further certificates through either the Sloan School or the engineering school on some of these, but that's a very detailed question that maybe as you look to get into the SDM program and ultimately register for courses, we support you with that there.
Ben, that might be a good time to answer one question that's come up a few times, which is if students enroll in the certificate program and are accepted into that, and then want to be transitioned into the master's program, do they need to do the full application? I don't know if you wanted to mention that quickly, Amal.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to also answer that one. So if you do start in the certificate program, again, that is a one-year program. And we look at that as, that's the program that you are interested in applying to and that you maybe were selected into. There is a pathway to ultimately transition from the graduate certificate program to the master's program. It does require you to complete the full master's degree application. We also do look for you to complete the core classes because that's going to give us an indication also about your ability to continue into other MIT engineering courses. So if your ultimate goal is really to be in the master's degree program, you might consider applying directly to that program. That said, we've structured it this way that you can ultimately transition because we do understand that in this, range of 8 to 10 years of work experience, which actually from year to year is roughly a continuum of about 3 to 30 years of work experience. There's a lot of variability in terms of how people can commit their time or financial support to maybe take on the full master's degree. So I would say each year right now, we probably have 5 to 7 students that do apply to transition from the graduate certificate to master's degree. And it really is a case-by-case basis as to whether or not they're accepted into the full master's degree moving forward. Amal, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I would just say, like, from an application perspective, so you will have to fill out a new application and you do go through the process of admissions. Just like everybody else, you'll be evaluated. The only thing that's different is the requirements. So you won't need as much. You would need one recommendation letter and you kind of update the old application and 2 new essays. And then obviously we do consider the grades you've received so far in the certificate program as part of making the decision.
Great, thank you, Amal. So moving forward, and I do want to be cognizant of time to make sure that we can also get to more Q&A and also spend some time with our current students and alumni that are here for a panel. I mentioned that we are quite career compatible. We want to meet you where you're at around the globe or in your career or in your life. And so we have a wide degree of flexibility in program length and approach to pursuing your degree. Both, we have on-campus full-time, local commuters. So we do have folks that maybe work in Boston or the local community and come into classes during normal times. And we also have opportunities to engage at a distance. I mentioned that we do provide synchronous digital delivery of our lectures. So prior to COVID, we had students both on campus in the classroom, roughly 2/3, and about a third of them of our students that were actually attending live lectures through Zoom. So we were actually in a good position to transition to full virtual campus back in April. And so this is something that we do plan to continue as a hybrid way in the future, and that really depends upon students' ability to come to campus or not. What I will say is there is, regardless of whether or not you come to campus for the core, but if you're pursuing the master's degree, there is an MIT Institute requirement that you spend at least 1 semester on campus. And if you're going through the graduate certificate pathway, we do require you to be on campus for at least 3 weeks. Typically that's 1 week in August when we start the program for a boot camp and orientation, 1 week in January to kick off a spring project, and then also 1 week in May for final presentations. Now, these requirements have been addressed for the current situation that we're in with COVID, and we will continue to evaluate these as we get closer to the fall and looking at the 2021 academic calendar and what ultimately MIT decides to do for in-person learning. This one I'll just quickly show. This isn't comprehensive. This is just some sample degree pathways with credit minimums. As I mentioned, in year one, we have our graduate certificate program. Typically, everyone here is working at least part-time, if not full-time. And you'll see that you have 15 credits in the fall, 6 during this IAP or January period, and then another 15 in the spring. So a total of 36 credits, and then a summer capstone. And that's, again, the end of that graduate certificate program. And you may transfer into the master's degree at a later date with an application and admission. Now, we do have, again, different ways in which students pursue the degree on the master's pathway. There's on-campus, maybe commuter, distance, or accelerated. These are just samples of some of the more common ways in which we see it. The accelerated one isn't anything that we generally promote. It's typically reserved for students that maybe come from the armed services and only get a very short amount of time to pursue a graduate degree. But you can see that it enables flexibility for folks that do want to continue working while pursuing a master's degree, but does require, again, an on-campus period, which is typically about 3 to 4 months. Now, prior to COVID, and this has continued during this time, we've been working with a number of professors and instructors across MIT to enable more distance-based courses where we do have that hybrid synchronous Zoom option. And these are courses that we find that a number of our students are interested in. Advanced practices in research and engineering project management, technology road mapping and development, multidisciplinary design optimization, or systems architecting applied to enterprises. This list may be subject to change, but this is what we went into this year with knowing that we had these as distance options. Obviously, most, or if not all, classes at MIT right now are provided with a digital option. I won't spend much time here, but we do have some MIT X Pro offerings from our instructors that are more introductory to some of these topics. We do have some students that start here and then ultimately apply into the full degree programs. And Amanda, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go through the employment report quite quickly, but this is also a question that we get is, what do we see from, the impact on someone's career and potentially their salary after graduating? Again, this is our master's degree, and it's data for students who graduated by December 2019. And remember that not all students are maybe getting a new job after they graduate. A large number of our students are not transitioning to a new company.
And just a quick note on that, Ben, that I always get the question at these events, so I think it's a good time to just quickly mention that the reason we are doing 2019 here and not 2020 is because we have 3 graduation dates, and so we compile the formal 2020 employment report in the middle of 2021.
Great, thank you, Amanda. Just what I was going to say here is, on average, the students come into SDM with a mean salary of roughly just under $100,000, but you can see it's quite a widespread. And then we do see, on average, about a 46% increase after graduation in mean salary for those that do transition jobs. But again, it doesn't mean that you're going to be guaranteed to get this salary. We do see that some students may be pursuing different opportunities, have a lower salary base, maybe other incentives or things, and some also do find a higher salary base. So it is quite a range. And we also do see that a number of our students stay in the Northeast. We also find that the West Coast, a lot in the maybe Bay Area or Los Angeles area, are quite popular. But we do also see students go to the Midwest, Southeast, and then also opportunities outside the US. Just a quick sample and view of some of the different employers that we have recently found our graduates going to. The employers who we find hiring multiple engineers or multiple SDM alums are highlighted with bolding and an asterisk. Companies like Tesla, Shell TechWorks. I'm one of these folks that stayed on here at MIT, and there's others Amazon Robotics has a strong presence here in Massachusetts. But you can see it's a wide range of industries, right? There's not a single sort of strength overdone in terms of industries. And then again, types of roles or types of jobs. We have some students that start their own companies and they become a co-founder or CEO or CTO. But we also have a number of folks that go into director positions, either on the technical side or maybe even the business development side of a company, or roles such as product management or program manager as well. And these range anywhere from senior roles up to maybe executive level roles as well. And just quickly here from my role, I mentioned that we have a strong connection with industry. We look to collaborate, not just with industry, but also government and other organizations such as nonprofits. And we really try to utilize our capacity to convene multidisciplinary and cross-industry collaborations. This comes through sponsorship of students, core course team projects, which I'll briefly touch on, guest lectures, maybe internship or full-time hires. During normal times, we also do go on site visits at local companies in the Boston or greater Boston area, as well as typically an annual trip to the Bay Area, and then also opportunities in sponsored research. So from the industry view, there's a lot of different ways to engage, a lot of which I highlighted on. But one thing that I'll point out here that I didn't talk much about is our alumni community. If you think about SDM as being 25 years old, an average person coming in with 8 to 10 years of work experience, we have some alumni that have a significant amount of career experience. And we try to leverage that as much as we can in engaging our alumni. And so that's an opportunity, again, as being part of the SDM community. It's not just those students that you're in the classroom with, but also alumni that you have an opportunity with to connect and network with or learn from. I'll just briefly touch on our spring project since we just kicked this off. You get a sense of some of the companies that we work with. This is something that we kick off at the beginning of January every year, and the students work on these projects through May. But you can see a wide range of different types of companies and industries represented: large global companies, smaller, tough tech startups. This year we had 41 project proposals from, I believe, 35 company sponsors. In this, we have the company's reverse pitch to the students, so it's very competitive from the company standpoint. We only have enough student teams for about 20 to 25 projects each year. And you can see, a collection of really interesting topics, and it makes it really, we try to make it hard on the students because there's a lot of really great things to work on. And just lastly, I mentioned, this year for COVID, we obviously have continued utilizing our live digital delivery of lectures. But for this particular event, we've also invested in an MIT virtual space. So just want to quickly share with you, and I want to turn my volume down because I don't want it to hurt your ears, but I'll quickly share a video of a recent event that we just had last week. So you get a sense of some of how we're engaging right now, but also a sense of what we do with our alumni in our community. I'm going to stop there. I know we've had a number of questions in the chat that we've tried to answer. We're going to also bring on a number of students here to also jump in and help answer questions. Amal or Amanda, do you see any from the chat that we should address now, or you think it's a good time to go ahead and introduce our student guests?
One more question, Ben, and then we move to the panel, and it's about waiving credits in either programs. So if you have a credit from outside MIT or within MIT, do we accept them and waive classes?
Yeah, that's not a question I feel like I have a good answer for right now. So if that's your question, I'd recommend that you reach out to us and we can follow up with you on that one on an individual basis. My experience and just feeling with it is based off of the degree requirements that require MIT credit. It's likely that those would not transfer, but that's something that we can look into for you if that's something that's really important. So now what I'd like to do is quickly introduce, we have 3 students, 2 that are current students, 1 a recent graduate. We have Erwin Franz. Erwin, if you want to do a quick wave, I'll ask you all to in succession here coming up, introduce yourself with a quick background. Bishop Revenel. Bishop, I saw you earlier. And then also David Park is joining us as well. And each of them can provide a little bit of background, starting with Erwin about your work experience, maybe a couple reasons why you joined SDM and what you're currently doing.
Hi guys, thank you, Ben. I work developing medical devices, specifically respiratory devices. I've been part of R&D groups for a long time, and I wanted to start leading them, and that brought me to SDM. I am almost finishing the program, and I'm happy to be here, guys, and answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Erwin. And Bishop, do you mind doing a short introduction?
Sure. My name is Bishop Ravenel. I graduated in May of last year. In my background, I was a federal prosecutor for about a decade and spent some time in the Marine Corps. And mid-career, I came and I did a year at Stanford and spent some time at MIT, including the SDM program.
Great. Thanks, Bishop. Great to see you, by the way. And David, if you could do a short introduction.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Hey, guys, I'm David Park. I mostly spend my time in the telecommunications industry in software development and delivery roles. So I've done a lot of project management, system engineering, and also development work. And I just wanted to use this program to move up to a leadership role. So, yep, that's been my journey. And I'm a first year for the program.
Great, thanks, guys. And I just do want to say it's a first for me to see someone from the U.S. Space Force on a Zoom meeting. So that's a nice to see. Good to see you, Jason. So maybe a place to start with some quick questions is, we did have people asking about their background, maybe both academic and work experience. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe your either technical or non-technical backgrounds and how that both of those opportunities set you up for SDM and how you found yourself fitting into the program? Erwin, we'll go ahead and start with you and just keep this in the same order.
Okay. I have a bachelor's in mechatronics engineering, and then I did a postgraduate degree in computerized manufacturing. I ran my own company for a few years, and that led me to do an MBA, and I had those postgraduate degrees before joining the program.
And Bishop, we know you spent some time as a prosecutor. So could you explain a little how you were able to sort of utilize that experience and with what you learned in SDM and the rest of the degree?
Yeah, sure. So my intent was to start a company or do something different. I did that for a while across 2 schools, and I just decided to shelve it kind of at the beginning of COVID and started looking at other things, decided to go back to government. And kind of what I would say is that SDM teaches you a new way to look at the world and at problems. And in talking to Donna Rose, my thesis advisor, basically was like, hey, this is a sector you like. You can apply all the same techniques in this sector. So I think that if you try to transition or you try to go back, you're developing a new way to look at the world as it is, a complex world with increasing complexity.
Great, thanks. And David, how about yourself?
Yeah, well, my background, I actually studied chemical engineering and electrical engineering for my undergrad. I have a master's in computer science. And since most of my education background was in a very hard sciences and technology, I wanted some business related background. However, I wasn't fully committed to going for an MBA. I wanted to stay and work with engineering, which is why I wanted to go for this program.
Great, thank you. And maybe we'll go reverse order on this one. We had a question come in for the students. Have you or did you hold a full-time or part-time job while doing the program? So David, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I'm actually working full-time right now, and a lot of my classmates are still working full-time or part-time. You know, many of us have been working in our industry for a while, so sometimes we have flexibility with work. Sometimes you schedule your courses so that it doesn't conflict with work. So there are many people who carry on their jobs along with their education.
Great, thanks. And David, are you doing the core only, or are you taking courses beyond the core as well?
I am taking the core, and I took some courses. This year it was a bit special due to COVID. With everything remote, scheduling worked out pretty well with no commute and whatnot. So yes, I've taken a core and other classes as well.
Great, thanks. And John, how about you? I don't recall if you were working while you were going through SDM.
I had a part-time job, but it was very insignificant. So it was mostly SDM.
And then you were also working on getting your company up and going. Is that right? You were
at the beginning,
engaged in the entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I was big in that field.
Right. And Erwin, I know you've done a mix of things as well as you've been in the program.
Yes, so I was a full-time employee the first year. I did the core like that, and then I took a leave of absence to finish the degree. And I'm currently in that process of transitioning back to to work with my employer.
And Erwin, you're one of our core TAs as well.
Yes.
So he's going through the SDM core twice, if you will, to learn it the second time, but also to help teach it.
So if anyone have questions about that, I'm your man.
Great. I'm looking through the chat here. There's some questions around extracurricular activities. I'll comment on this one just from my experience, is that there's a lot that goes on at MIT, especially if you're interested in engineering, science, technology, or a whole lot of other aspects of I'd just say technology in general. Managing your time is one of the hardest things that you have to do, right? There's a lot of different ways to learn, whether it's through courses or extracurricular activities. And so that's depending on what you're interested in. There's clubs that you can join. There's a lot of different types of hackathons with different focus. There's labs that you can get involved in and learn new skills around making things. Erwin, John, or David, feel free to add in any that you guys have done from that extracurricular side of things.
Yeah, I was real involved in Sandbox. I was there for a year before I started SDM, and Sandbox is like an accelerator. But basically, all you have to do is walk down the Infinite Corridor, and you're just going to see a million flyers, and there's no way you're going to be able to handle all the extracurricular opportunities and every single thing you could possibly want to do. You can learn how to fly a plane while you're at MIT if you want to.
Second that. I did some, for my thesis project, I got involved with some professors, and we pitched a project with the MIT Sandbox as well, and MIT gave us some money to actually develop the prototype. So that's one of the extracurricular activities that I got involved in.
One thing I would add too is that it doesn't matter if you're MBA or you're Sloan or you're SDM or anything like that once you get into MIT in terms of the types of teams you can build or the access you have. So it's not like there's different class citizens. If you get in, you're at MIT, you're considered worthy to be at MIT, and you can go anywhere and do anything in MIT.
And what I would say is that, the SDM program is a great entry point in that you're somewhat forced to go to different parts of campus. You have engineering courses, you have courses in the Sloan School. Again, this is during on-campus time, which we're optimistic about for next year. And so you're going to meet a lot of really interesting people. And to me, that was one of the biggest takeaways is the network and the people that you meet who are also there to do some really incredible things. And you get exposed to things you've never even thought of. And so it's just a really exciting place to be. So I see a few questions around scholarships or funding options. Currently, SDM does not offer fellowships to students. As I mentioned, there's a number of different ways in which you can go through the program. And so we have both high tuition and low tuition rates depending on the number of credits that you take per semester. Or there's opportunities that if you're just doing the core classes only, that's going to be at a reduced tuition rate than if you were doing a full set of classes. And then also the question around RA and TA roles, often those roles, depending on which school they're in, they do cover a significant amount of your tuition or even a stipend. It is going to vary on role to role and ultimately which school that's with. But we do find that a lot of our students who are interested in finding those types of roles often do. There's not like a great guide on how to find one of those. Often it's based off of maybe your experience, or you took a class and you create a relationship with the instructor, or you may have a specific background, right, that a lab is really interested in. What I will say is, our students come in with a significant amount of experience and, already know how to do a lot of things. And so that's a pretty high value, not necessarily to call it a commodity, but a high value level of experience for labs and instructors across campus. Looking through some questions here.
Can you talk about the time when the core is and like the day and time that it's available? And are there any night classes or weekend and so on?
Yeah, so the SDM core is typically scheduled, so it's 15 credit hours in the fall, right? And so if you remember back, that's roughly one hour per credit per week. So if you think about your week, you've got 15 hours. We take 6 of those hours for course and recitation time. And so that's broken out into, we have the classes, our lectures are scheduled on Monday and Wednesday between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. This is Eastern time, right? Boston time. And we've scheduled it that way because it is relatively accessible for folks across the globe. Now, there are some exceptions to that. And during COVID, we've made accommodations. And again, these are live synchronous. So if you're in the Boston area and you're an on-campus student, you're in the classroom during normal times. And if you're taking it as a distance student, right, you're logged in through Zoom, and we have a special setup in the classroom so that your face is present. When you ask questions, you're up on a Jumbotron, basically. So that's the course, right? Monday, Wednesday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's 2 hours, each of those lectures. And then there's a recitation session in between. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, you're expected to attend 1 hour recitation session. Now there's two sections for that typically during normal years. There's an 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern, or then the following hour, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. on Tuesday and Thursday. So 6 hours there with an expectation of 9 hours of time spent out of the classroom and recitations. And that's geared a lot towards team-based projects and homework assignments. And we expect you to be, working with team members that are also maybe across different time zones. So finding times to coordinate and work together. A lot of times it's nights and weekends. For other courses at MIT, right, those schedules are going to be varied. Right now, when you look at the course catalog for this year, things have been somewhat compressed to try to accommodate for a broad set of time zones. But we've also found that courses, and SDM has done this, is extended different recitation sessions or opportunities to engage with TAs or instructors to accommodate for time zones, maybe in the Asian continent or maybe even Australia. Right now, what I will say is in looking at 2021 and the plan for MIT, there's still a lot of questions there. The Higher Level Institute has not committed to what that's going to look like yet. We're all optimistic with where things are at with the vaccine right now, but there's a lot of variables that go into that in terms of what will be on campus and what may not be. Just a quick question on the GMAT GRE requirement. There's some specific language on our website right now about how we're handling that. Currently, it's not a requirement for the application. If you have taken it either recently or in a distant past, you're welcome to submit your score. It won't be counted negatively against your application, right? It can only have a positive impact. But if you haven't taken it, there are challenges around scheduling that and taking that right now. So it's not something that's required for this current application cycle. That may change, next year as we get back to hopefully a post-COVID time. Question on when does the session start on campus? I don't have the specific, this is the date that the 2021 academic calendar year is going to start. It's typically right at the beginning of September. But for MIT SDM, we host a boot camp / orientation for cohort building and an introduction to MIT in the program, typically in the week to 2 weeks before that. And that's something that we provide information on as we get further into the year. So typically I'd say, mid-August is when you would likely be seeing your first required sessions with SDM. And for that graduate certificate requirement of being on campus for, roughly 3 weeks out of the year, that August week is the first week on campus. I've seen a few questions come through around, I have 4.5 years of experience, or is there a requirement that you have past systems engineering experience? There's a guideline, right? We're looking, like I mentioned, it's an average of 8 to 10 years of work experience, but that's not a requirement. It is a continuum. And we take into consideration, again, your academic background and what you've achieved in your career. And I'll say from personal experience, there's a difference between quantity of experience and quality of experience, right? And so you may have accomplished a tremendous amount in a 3-year period, right? Depending upon the role and responsibility that you've had. Really what's important is that you communicate that to us, right? Why has what you've done in those 3 years based off of your academic experience set you up for this? How does SDM ultimately enable you to achieve the next goals that you have in your career? And so for those of you that are, sort of on the cusp, it really depends upon, again, not just the length of your experience, but the quality of that and what you've done in terms of how we look at your application. And I see someone here who's gone through our graduate certificate program, Nick. Curious if you have any any comments in terms of your experience in going through the 1-year graduate certificate that you might care to share with folks. And great to see you, by the way.
Hey, good to see you too. It was definitely an experience. It's a unique thing getting to do that with MIT and spending a year remote. It's definitely different from the master's students. So if you're interested in doing the master's program, I recommend starting there. There's definitely a different thing, but you're still a part of the same cohort and you go through the same core classes. And so it's definitely changed my way of thinking. I think John mentioned that. It does change the way you think about the world, and it's a lot of work, especially working full time, but it's definitely worth it.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I saw a question come through around application cycle, and Amal, I may lean on you to correct me if I answer this incorrectly, but The application, the first round came in about 2 weeks ago, so we're going through reviews of that. The second round of applications is going to be due on April 2nd. And the question is, if you apply or if you submit your application before April 2nd, is it considered on a rolling basis? My experience is that we look at them once the deadline comes in on April 2nd. So it's not that if you applied today that you would have a review prior to what someone might be who applies on April 2nd. Does that sound right, Amal?
Yes, that's correct. What we do is we do allow a week after the deadline for everybody to catch up. Like recommenders, they usually are behind. So after that week, you are part of that round, you will be looked at for that deadline. Anything past that week, you will be considered for the second deadline, and that has its own dates. But also, if there is a need of a rush decision, if you have, I don't know, military company requirements that you need a decision outside our deadlines, let us know and we can work with you on a case by case. Other than that, is whatever the deadline is will apply to you. And we do take 4 weeks after the deadline to read the applications and review them. After 4 weeks, we will meet and I'll reach out. And when I reach out, it's either you get a request to be interviewed or unfortunately a reject or encourage a reject. We'll let you know what's needed. And then the interview process takes about another 3 weeks to 4 weeks. And then you get a final decision of an offer or whatever the case is. So total of 8 weeks from the deadline.
Great, thanks, Amal. And just real quick, there's the question around the credit hours of the two different pathways. The graduate certificate program and the master's program, that core class is 36 credit hours, right, from August to May. So that's over the fall term, an IAP January period, and the spring term. The graduate certificate has a capstone project that is an additional 9 credits. So in total, the graduate certificate is 45 credit hours. 36 of those are transferable if you become a master's student. That capstone project is one that's not transferable. If you are then looking at the master's degree pathway, there's an additional 54 units that are required of that mixed engineering and management coursework that you're looking to achieve. And so that brings the total up to about, I think, right at 90 credit hours. But then you have to also remember there is a requirement for a 24 credit thesis as well that's taken into account for that. And those vary in terms of who your advisor is in topics in engineering or management. There's a website, and Erwin, I don't know if this is something you can add to the chat for the DSpace site if students are interested in looking at thesis work that our students have done. You can find the SDM community for thesis. You can read my thesis or John's thesis or a whole bunch of others to kind of get a sense of some of the research that our students do and instructors that they meet.
A question about international students applying based on round 1 or 2. We do encourage you guys to apply by the first deadline just because of visa processing, and if you need to relocate, the whole process will be longer for you than a domestic student. So we encourage you to apply by the first deadline, but that doesn't mean you can apply by the second deadline. If you think it'll fit with your dates and depending on the country you're from and how long it's going to take for the visa, if that fits, then you can go ahead and apply by the second deadline. And also that's where a rush decision might apply. So if we need to rush you so that you can meet all the deadlines, we'll do that. So we do work on case by case. You just need to communicate that with me. And also SDM program as a program, we start once a year. So you have to start in August for orientation or boot camp, what we call, and then the official start would be in September with the rest of MIT. And MIT's academic calendar does apply to our students, even though we start in August. So keep that in mind. The terms, the start, the end date, the add, the drop, all of that will apply to you.
Great. So we're coming up just a little bit past an hour. I just want to say a quick thank you to Erwin, John, and David. Thank you guys for joining us and sharing some of your background and experience with SDM. Before we close off, is there anything else that you guys would like to add, as you might be remembering back to when you were applying for the SDM program?
Say the question one more time, Ben?
If there's anything else that you'd like to add, for prospective students that you might remember from when you were thinking about applying and, now that you have sort of the hindsight experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think the engineering and management combo is something really important when you think about the types of problems you have to deal with nowadays. Like you're still going to get your core like finance and strategy and stuff like that out of Sloan, but you're dealing with stuff that's more realistic. SDM deals with the complexity that you're really going to face. So I think it's kind of like it's the next iteration of what you're going to see from business schools and management programs.
Thanks, John.
I will complement that. If you have a vision as a professional, there's no better place than MIT probably and the SDM program to achieve whatever you guys want, because there are so many options for you to get whatever you need.
I like to refer to it as a choose your own adventure program, which is it's a great place to do that is MIT. And I'll just say from my personal experience, and then I oversee the graduate certificate program. What you learn in the SDM core and a lot of these systems adjacent classes is highly translatable between industries and technical domains. Again, we work on projects every year from agriculture to automotive, aerospace, things that don't start with A's, medical devices, software technologies, you name it, there's ways to architect it, right? And figure out how to connect value to what you're doing. So I'll just echo, I think the engineering management combo is really strong. I'm a little biased because I'm an alum, but hope that you all found this to be informational. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we look forward to reading your applications if you do decide to submit one. So thank you all very much.